Again, Israel's in the news, obviously, all the time. Has been really on a lot of people's minds ever since October the 7th of 2023 happened, and now hostages are starting to be returned, and now we're starting to receive the bodies, and in this case, the bones of those that are left, and so we don't know how many are still alive. It's not looking good. So anyway, we just don't really know. So of course, they're going to be very much in the news. But beyond that, there is the big question about, well, are they really God's people? Are they really the ones that he has brought back into the land? Do they have the right to be there? Are they just the usurpers? Are they just Jews in name only because they're ungodly? What all is going on with that? So if we look back, most importantly, we understand that the nation itself has its real genesis, if you will, in the person of Abraham. That's where the nation was first ultimately given. And so what you find is that there is much discussion in the church that really Israel doesn't have a right to exist, because really anything that God had ever promised, because of their rejection of the Messiah, has really kind of come to the church, and that we're his spiritual Abraham. That's what you get in Galatians 3. I did a complete conference on this, and you can find it on our YouTube channel under the conferences, and it's dealing with the modern state of Israel and who has the rights to the land. You can see it there. It's the case for modern Israel. And you can see I go into it in some great detail along with these passages here. But here's the big pieces to remember in this. The first three passages that I would point you to that are very, very important are, the first of all is really the one that deals with the generations. And it's found in chapter 12. We hear it repeated a lot in Genesis 12:3, where it says, with Abram, I'm going to bless those who bless you, I'm going to curse those who curse you, and through you all the nations will be blessed. And the nations means like the generations of man. But if he's speaking to Jewish people only, that doesn't necessarily work, because he's saying to humanity as a whole is going to be blessed because of you. And that can only work if you consider that the Messiah would come through his line directly. So from Abraham to Isaac, Isaac then to Jacob, Jacob then to his sons, one of whom was Judah, and through the line of Judah we come to the person of Jesus Christ. And he's the one who makes the blessing to all of humanity. It has nothing to do with genetics, and it has nothing whatsoever to do with land. It has everything to do with a spiritual relationship that we are brought into as far as God is concerned. So that's the covenant that he makes, and that is the promise of chapter 12 is found in the person of Jesus to all who would believe. Jew and Gentile alike, doesn't matter. That's what makes up and comprises the church. We are made up in the person of Christ Jesus as a body of believers from wherever, and there's no distinction. When you get to chapter 15 is a much different story, because he makes a covenant with him that there is going to be children born to him, and through one of them, he's going to give to them, first of all, in the genealogic sense, he's going to make a people out of them. And the generations are going to be tied to him genetically through his son Isaac. And when it comes to that, you get that little bit of detail in chapter 16. They didn't hear God, and they didn't listen. They didn't ask the follow-up questions like we just learned in Proverbs. They didn't say, okay, let me make sure we understand this, God, because we're way past childbearing years. Are you saying that this is going to come through us? Because if it had, they could have spared themselves problems that are still happening and around us today because of what happened with Ishmael. If they had asked the follow-up question, if Abram said, Abram and Sarai, both of us, if he's talking about himself, none of us are capable, neither of us is capable of having children, but you're saying we're going to have one? They would have avoided all the problems. Instead, they take matters into their own hands, and Abram goes to Hagar, and Hagar has Ishmael, and the rest is bad history. God even says to Abraham, when we get to chapter 17, when he reiterates this promise, that I'm going to make a forever covenant with you and your descendants after you, from Abraham to Isaac, Isaac to Jacob, and then to his sons, the tribes of Israel. It's forever. It's a forever covenant of the land and of the people. He doesn't put a shelf life on it. He said, this is the way it's going to be. So when he says, well, let Ishmael walk before you, because Isaac wasn't even born at the time. So God says to Abraham, "No, Isaac will not walk before me. It will be from your own family, and that being, it's going to be between you and Sarai." And then that, of course, was Isaac, and he was born to them after that. So the promise of the land, though he had other sons, Ishmael would have been one, and he did not settle in the nation of Israel. He went east and down in Egypt and then to the east. So his whole territory was much different than what is Israel proper currently. So the promise of the land and the promise of the people, which would have encompassed anything that Ishmael could have gone to, because God gave him the Nile to the Euphrates. He gave them all that. That was part of the covenant back in chapter 15. But if we look at our world today, since he made that an everlasting covenant, he also promises, especially when you look at Jeremiah 30, really starting from 29 to 30 into 31, those are your real wheelhouse kind of chapters, that there is the restoration of them after they come back from the Babylonian captivity, but all the way to the day of the Lord, they are his people in the land. And they have not been in the land until the middle of last century. So the promise that he was going to restore them to the land. The objection that we get oftentimes is that, well, they're secular, and they were brought back because of the world powers kind of giving them the land again, probably as a reaction, as some would say, because of what happened to them in World War II. But some were able to come back to their ancestral lands. But it wouldn't have happened if not for the world powers and the Rothschilds and some secular people that used their influence and their money and their power to prop up a Jewish nation, or a nation. And that's usually the objection that we get in this. But the idea that, first of all, he would bring them back to the land, even though many in the land itself were not walking with God. We see that when it happens. Zerubbabel is the first one who leads them back after the Babylonian captivity. So here is your precedent. God brought them back into the land because it was his timing for them to be brought back. With their case, it was 70 years. That part was told to them. At the end of the 70 years from the Babylonians into the Persians, they were able to go back to the land after that 70 years because God said it would be 70 years. They come back with Zerubbabel. They're not walking with the Lord. So they're brought back to the land in unbelief, many of them, and they're using a secular source to bankroll the project. Cyrus, in this case, paid for everything. By the time you get to Nehemiah and Ezra, same situation. God is using those secular sources. By that time, Xerxes, Artaxerxes, other kings were spending the money to send them back and let them rebuild. And you had ones who were faithful, Ezra, Nehemiah, other ones who went back just because they wanted to. And you saw it didn't take long for corruption to come back in, even after all that great work that they had done. So we want to be really, really careful to say the nation of Israel, as we see it right now, you have a lot of non-Jewish people from other parts that they have Jewish citizenship, and they live in Israel as citizens. Doesn't mean that they're all faithful believers. Many of them are not going to survive when the tribulation comes, and they will not put their trust and their faith in the Lord. The ones that get taken away to the wilderness, maybe it's Petra, wherever that may be, wherever God takes them, those are the faithful, but many will stay behind and be put to death. So just because they're in the land doesn't mean that they're walking with God, just like other times when they came back into the land. They're back in the land because God's setting up the end times kind of scenario. And the idea that it's run by a secular government, many who don't want anything to do with God, and that much of the rank and file of the people, though they may have genetic ties to the land and all that stuff, they're part of that promise that God had, doesn't mean that they're walking with him, but that wasn't the condition of him bringing them back into the land. None of the passages where God said he would restore them to the land had anything to do with their faithfulness at the time. It had everything to do with them coming back because the time was then, and God was going to make it so. That's what we need to remember. That's the important part. And if you want further detail on that, go back to the conference, the list of the conference studies, and you'll find the Case for Modern Israel.